for Education NGOs. Fred, you are welcome.
Good morning, viewers. Good morning, everyone attending this conference. Good morning, fellow Ugandans. Should say perhaps I'm privileged to be here this morning at such a time, but probably I should also say I'm unlucky that I'm here at such a time, because as in the education sector, or within the education sector in the country, we all know the challenges we faced in 2020 and the challenges we are facing now, in addition to the challenges that have been attendant to the sector over the years. I'm happy that and thankful to the government of Uganda that now we have a plan ahead of ourselves for the schools reopening. Somehow that now poses and gives us more hope that the challenges of COVID-19, for which the education sector has borne perhaps the biggest part of the brunt of it, is now, in our face, but we are also facing it. I said at the beginning that I'm a little bit unlucky because I started the primary education at such challenging times in the mid-1970s, when schools did not have just simple basics like chalk, or like textbooks, or even pens and exercise books. I remember in my home district, Rakai, which borders with northern Tanzania, exercise books used to be smuggled across borders. This was very unfortunate. And now here I am, sending my children to school in almost the same circumstances, very challenging times. I would say I'm a little bit or quite a bit unlucky. But I'm lucky as well that I'm here facing the challenges in the face. And I want to be thankful again to also World Vision for coming up with this topic and theme on social accountability. When I tell you I went to school in such challenging times, when schools didn't have simple supplies like chalk and exercise books, then one should be able to ask, or one should be wondering, how did I pull through? And I wasn't alone. I didn't sit in the school alone. And how the schools, managed to pull through so that we are here today. And this is what we are talking about. Service delivery in education through social accountability, whereby we don't apportion blame. We all know this situation. We can't say government. We can't say DEO. We can't say district X, Y, Z. This is a challenge for the whole world. So how do we develop resilient schools? In my opinion and conviction, that we can only develop resilient schools that can withstand and face such challenges like this one through the parents. Active participation of the parents. Yes, we know parents are facing all kinds of challenges. Many have lost their livelihoods. They have lost their sources of income. Their lives have been turned upside down. Some children have been at home for almost a year now. Some have gone astray. Others, younger girls, have become pregnant. Some have delivered. Others have not yet delivered. And these all are challenges to the parents. How do we build resilient homes, resilient communities, resilient families that would in turn build resilient schools. It's by way of drumming it up into our minds, by way of understanding and accepting this is a challenge that has visited us, unfortunately, as a country, as a society, as communities, and as families. We cannot be pointing fingers, say government, say this, say so and so. We can only pointing a finger at the challenge itself. And when we do that, what do we do? Then we forge collaborative mechanisms between parents, between teachers, between the government officials, administrators and all titles, and then forge a way forward all together. For example, we know now that schools will be opening in 2 weeks' time. Everyone is going to be now raising the alarm. Where is the money to pay? Where are our teachers? We don't know where they are, and we don't know where they have been ever since the closure of schools, starting from 2020. What is the state of our schools? How ready are they? How ready are our teachers? How ready are our parents? How ready are the children themselves? It is very easy to ask all these questions. And sometimes it is very easy to direct these questions to certain offices. As Ugandans, we have a very common narrative or saying, say, tusaba government tuyambe. We request that government helps us. But what do we do to help government to help ourselves? What do we do to enable that government to help us? I think that's a very good, big question. And that's what I would like to call upon my fellow Ugandans at such challenging times. That as we ask for government to help us, as we ask the district offices to help us, as we ask schools to help us, as we ask everyone, we should also be actively helping. How do we do this? Particularly the parents. Prepare your child starting today, now that we know when schools are reopening. Do whatever you can to prepare your child to go back to school. And then you would request the school, please, if your charges are this, we know some schools are charging. Yes, we know others are not supposed to charge. But for those, say, for example, who are charging, what request are you ready to put ahead or to put to the school manager? And the school in turn, how are we helping the parent who is now bringing the child back to school to catch up or to be able to enable the child to come back to school? I gave an example that I grew up at times almost like this. When I started primary education, schools had nothing. But how did we pull through? I remember very well parents coming to schools just to slash. Parents coming to school to smear. They used to mix cow dung and dirt and paint classrooms. It's the parents, because there was almost no government to demand anything from at that time. And parents were able to build resilient schools and resilient education mechanisms and systems that saw people like me go through education. And I'm proud that I managed it. And it's unfortunate that such resilience within our families, such resilience within our communities and society seems to be going away. We seem to be focusing on pointing fingers, portioning blame, and demanding. How I wish we could turn the demands into provisions, whatever we can, and however we can, and whenever we can. And I would love to hear that. And once again, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak to my countrymen and women. And let's hear from others.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mwesigwa. He has dictated what the tone of the conversation will be. So we're not going to apportion blame. And if one of the panelists does apportion blame, they should also be quick to give solutions. Both Ramsey and Mr. Mwesigwa, I would like to thank you very much for what you have shared with us. We'll now transition into our panel discussion. And in a very short while, I will be introducing our panelists. But just for some context, in 2020, particularly March 18th, government closed education institutions to limit the spread of COVID-19. Later that year, some schools were opened, especially for candidates to be able to prepare to do their exams. In 2021, schools opened up for more students to come. And as the second wave of COVID-19 hit the country, schools were not spared and schools were closed. There's been a lot of uncertainty about how we're going to move forward. But in the past couple of days, government has made pronouncements that you did hear Mr. Mwesigwa refer to, and that will form part of our conversation. But the gist of what we're talking about today is service delivery in the education sector. And World Vision, through a number of mechanisms that they have actually studied. And we will look at the case study of Buyukwe District. We will hear from some people that are working in Buyukwe, just to understand how schools can become resilient, and at the end of the day, that the learners can get a quality service when they go to the schools. So allow me to introduce the panelists we have today. I will begin with the gentleman who is right next to me, on my right. He is the program manager, Buyukwe. He works for World Vision, Mr. Pascal Freeman Owucha. Good morning and welcome. Right next to him is the National Female Youth Member of Parliament, Honorable Fiona Nyamotoro. We're very glad to have you here. Children do not have a member of parliament directly, but you're a member of parliament for the youth, and therefore you will take the young people with you.
Absolutely. They are part of the youth category.
Yes, yes. Right next to her, we have the District Education Officer, Buyukwe District, Mr. Chizito Musazi. And we're very glad to have you all the way from Buyukwe. And I hope you can share with us some of the experiences of your district. I will introduce two other panelists, but right after we hear from Freeman. Just, Ramsey did give us a bit of, a sneak peek of what these social accountability mechanisms look like. You actively do this in the field. So could you please just explain to the viewer about the social accountability mechanisms that World Vision uses and how exactly they've worked in the education sector?
Good morning, viewers. I work for World Vision Uganda, and I'm based in Buyukwe District as the program manager for all the programs that are implemented by World Vision in Buyukwe District. The question about social accountability, it's an accountability approach that is intended to enable citizen engagement. Citizen engagement in monitoring what government is giving as a service to the people, But World Vision's approach to social accountability is called Citizens Action, Citizens Voice and Action. It's an approach that is, and other service providers, so that the quality of service is improved for the children and the communities where we work. Secondly, we are actually engaging the citizens in a more constructive, like Ramsey said, constructive dialogue, which is non-confrontational. We want the users of the service, we want government, for that matter, to come into a dialogue. And when we do this, we are actually assessing standards that are set by government. If they say that 3 children should sit on one desk, if they say that this is the pupil to teacher ratio, so we empower the service users, who are the communities. We empower them. We empower them to know the standards, and when they know the standards, then they are able to have a community engagement where they are actually discussing these standards. Government is represented through the local government. The people are mobilized to be to participate in the process, and then once we have enabled them, we've educated them. They know the policies, they know the laws. Then we go into scoring the quality of the service. Is the service that is being provided in this school matching the standards that government set? Which standards are supposed to be there for us to have a quality service, for us to access the service, because it's about accessing the service, but also the service being of quality. So once that is done, because there is a scorecard mechanism where the community is sitting down and scoring, and they are saying, yes, in this school we are supposed to have 8 teachers, but we have only 5 teachers, or we have 6 teachers. So then, based on the findings, leaders from the district, from the government, come for a summit where these findings are put before them and they are able to discuss. And the thing there is that a plan of action has to be developed to address these gaps that are being seen in the delivery of the services. That is the fundamental goal of citizens' voice and action, that this gradually and continuously, these standards are being improved in those schools.
And what happens to that action plan?
That action plan is implemented. We have a team that is called the Citizen Voice and Action Practitioners. They are trained. They understand these policies of government that concerns education. So they come up with that plan of action, and they monitor that plan of action. They revisit the plan of action. They call for meetings with government representatives, and they follow through the action until the action is closed. And we have seen that in Buikwe. We've had cases where we did not have enough teachers, and when this was raised through Citizens' Voice and Action, the district education office took the initiative to ensure that they recruit more teachers to fill the gaps that are there. And that is what I am talking about.
How long ago was this?
We've been running this for quite some time now. For the last 5 years, we've been running this model of Citizen Voice and Action in Buikwe. And we've assessed every school where we are working. We are mainly in 3 sub-counties, 2 sub-counties and 1 division, Kawolo, Ngogwe, and then Buikwe Rural. So all the 23 schools there have gone through an assessment by the community, and they have come up with action plans that we monitor on a monthly basis, And on a quarterly basis, we are able to engage and see to it that these actions are actually implemented. By the way, we have even had schools where there is shortage of classrooms, construction done. And this is not by World Vision, but by the local government, because we have many partners in the district that also contribute to this, and government itself.
All right. We have the District Education Officer of Buyukwe, who you just actually referred to in your submission. And so since he's here, we'll let him speak for himself. This model that World Vision has, you know, how has it worked for your district?
Thank you, moderator. As the program manager has rightly said, the CVA, or the Citizen Voice and Action, is a model they have been using for some time. The district, in fact, was brought by World Vision, and it's a situation where once in a while, in fact, every 4 months of the year, we have engagement with the community. And the World Vision sponsors all these programs. And not only World Vision, we have, as I said, we have other partners who also come in and use the same model, where we engage the community. We have stakeholders conferences. And not alone that, but we also have village meetings where all these people are engaged to discuss much about the service delivery. And the area of education, we have had a lot of contribution from the community. As he has raised, in very many other cases, we have seen the community, the parents, coming up to inform us of our gaps. As he has said, issue of teachers. We have had the issue of infrastructure in schools. And I want to inform you that as we talk now, because this model has been there for some time, Buyukwe is ahead in most of the things. I'll give you an example: infrastructure, especially along the lake shores. We have built schools, and these schools have been built by partners. We have Iceland. World Vision has done the same in the sub-counties where they work. And some of these partners are building a complete school, complete, giving all the infrastructure required, right from the classroom, the latrines, water, harvesting. As we talk now, they are even gone to secondary schools and they are constructing ICT rooms and laboratories. So the mechanism is really working.
Mr. Musazi, as you point out the ways in which the mechanism has worked for Buyukwe, we are mindful that schools have been locked down.
Yes.
The status you're giving us, is this before schools actually, in fact, with the announcement that in 2 weeks they will be opening, that people are wondering, how are we going to open these schools? Are we ready?
Moderator, the issue of being ready and not ready, I would say yes and no. As you are aware, the issue of opening schools, as we talk now, after the media has alerted the public, all stakeholders are on alert to take their children to school. Everybody is ready at whatever cost. Then too, despite the pandemic, you are aware it is the government's obligation to provide education services at whatever cost. And therefore, it's the right of the citizens to education. So the government have to. But we also have to learn from the previous mistakes, gaps we had in the previous reopening of schools. Yes, there were gaps. For example, somebody was talking about it, that schools were hiding the sick learners, but this is not very true. People were not just aware. You know, they thought it was normal cough, But I think now we realize that this was real COVID and we have to take action with all this. Now, but another issue is that COVID has come to stay. Should we ignore learning because of COVID? So we have to get ways how we should move alongside the COVID. So that is the positive part of it. I would say the yes. But now the no is we have conditions to fulfill before we open. To have safe opening of schools, we have conditions we have to fulfill. And if these conditions are fulfilled, then we shall say, all of us, we shall say, yes, now we should now open. First of all, the first thing we have to do is to have a multi-sectoral campaign so that all sectors come in to help in this issue. All sectors, I mean whoever is a stake in education. Our partners, as World Vision and others, the ministries responsible, education, health, even finance. As we talk now, there are schools which do not have, we don't have the grants. Yes, primary schools received something by the end of the last financial year. Maybe they're still there. Secondary schools and higher institutions have not received in the first quarter. So all these things have to be. Then the other issue is the SOPs. Are schools ready? To me, I think the information of opening schools should be communicated a bit earlier so that schools reorganize themselves. They know the SOPs, yes, but do they have the facilities in place as per now? Private schools, all of us are aware, they're in dates. Now, if you inform them tomorrow that schools are opening, then that will be another chaos. Even government schools, as I talk now, many private schools have closed. That means that we are going to have a higher enrollment in the government schools. The other issue is, do we have the infrastructure for those learners? Yes, there are options. As we talk, Minister has suggested staggering of the afternoon, P6 and P7, and maybe senior 3, senior 4, senior 6. So all these things, we need to put them into consideration. Water is another big issue. We have places where they have not seen rain for some time. Maybe there is even no water sources. All these things should be looked into so that we come to a conclusion that we are opening school at least safely. We should not put our learners at stake, even if we have had, for example, the truth is we have had learners who have not been to school for 2 years.
Right.
P1 to P3, nursery schools. So they have not been to school. But we cannot just open up because we want to open, but there are issues we have to look into.
All right. We'll come back to a number of those issues that you have raised, but I'd like now to bring in the honorable member, the National Female Youth Representative, Honorable Fiona Nyamutoro. You have heard the submissions that have been made from the gentleman that came before. And first of all, from your position, what concerns do you have around, what's going on in the education sector?
Thank you very much. From my perspective, which is a young person's lens, there are a number of concerns that I would like to put across from the education sector. First of all, it is no question that education is the bedrock of development. And when we are talking about a country with a fast-growing population, such as Uganda, we talk of figures 75% being young people. What is not relayed out there is out of that 75%, 60% of it are below the age of 15. So it means we are actually talking about school-going children. What that means is that at the end of the day, every single decision, every single policy that we endorse as legislators, in one way or another, will affect the future of these children. Now, in the wake of COVID-19, my mind tells me in an ironic manner, it has come as a a blessing in disguise if we are to discuss it today. Because then we wouldn't be having this discussion today. This discussion is way overdue. Us having a discussion as leaders, as citizens, on how we can better the service delivery of our education sector. Because at the end of the day, we are all aware that we are discussing the quality of citizens that we have for the future. COVID-19 has been a wake-up call to parents in all communities across the country that the task of raising a responsible, morally upright, and law-abiding citizen is an uphill task. That parents have now come to the realization it is not something you can actually do on your own, because the time you get to spend at home, especially if you are a working parent, might never give you the time to teach your children these values of society, might never give you the time to give them the exposure that they need to be able to live with other human beings harmoniously in a community. So now the appreciation of teachers has gone high. Now we understand that actually teachers play a very big role in raising our children. And we are also caught up in between saving lives and debating for the future. Because it is not funny at all that we wake up to situations where a P1 pupil is introducing themselves and they are saying, I am in primary 1, year 2. You worry for how long they are going to spend in that, but also vis-a-vis looking at the quality. Because if you have a curriculum that has been designed to be taught in 7 years for a child to complete a basic, decent primary education, and then now because they have been lagged behind by the closing of schools, and now we are going to reopen, we have different sects of students. We have a category of senior 4 that is in 2 sects, those that received their results and those that are yet to sit. The same situation is in A-level. You wonder, are we going to fast track the ones that are behind so that they can catch up with the syllabus and finish on time? Will that compromise the quality of education output that we are giving to Uganda? Will that compromise the quality of citizens that are going to serve this nation? So to me, really, I think it is a very tricky situation for us as leaders, but we are at a point where we have all come to the acceptance that we need to move on with COVID-19.
All right.
And we need to plan accordingly and still ensure that we put at the back of our mind that raising a generation is entirely our foundation to lay. When we talk about social responsibility and social accountability, the impact that COVID-19 has had on the education sector is very immense. We might never get enough time to recover from it or even measure to say that this is how we have been affected. I get pleased when I am hosted on a panel of men like this, because then I get the opportunity to speak about the plight of the girl child, which has been one of the greatest effects that COVID-19 has had on us, rampant teenage pregnancies. Because before, we were drumming and saying, oh, please, let's encourage the girl child to stay in school.
Keep the girl in school, and
yes.
Many of the indicators will become positive.
Exactly. Let's encourage her to stay in school, finish a decent education. Now she has spent 2 years without being in school. And where is intercourse? I think you see how much it dawns on us, because, I mean, you are a responsible adult. Either you have finished your education or still on course of it, but you are out there engaging a schoolgirl in sexual activity. Maybe because she has probably not yet had the sensitization or education on reproductive health. She's probably naive that you will take advantage of that situation. Or even when she is not, because of the lockdown she needs, it's very unfortunate. So to me, when we talk about social responsibility, it dawns out to the entire moral aspect of what the people lay down. When we talk about social responsibility, imagine since the institution of UPE and USE till today, we are still struggling with having free education Because that has always been President Museveni's goal, having totally free education for pupils. It came down to secondary, even the government scholarships that we have in university. You hear stories of them being misused. It is the privileged instead that get the scholarships at the cost of the vulnerable that would be beneficiaries to also have a decent education. I do not understand why we have to have a discussion, because at the end of the day, it is for the benefit of us all. It is for the betterment of our future. When we get to that discussion and then the businessmen do not want you to touch some buttons, but it is actually the truth. Can we get to appreciate education as a channel of building citizens that will relay back to the development of this country? Can we appreciate education as a foundation for a better Uganda? And then maybe we could be able to deal away with all these things we are discussing today. Maybe we could be able to adopt the alternative approaches like the model in Buyikwe and take it and stretch it out to different parts of the country. So to me, really, I think this has been a wake-up call to government, to private society, and to all of us as citizens of Uganda, that the importance in which we attach education has been for granted. And yet it should never be that way. It should be a situation of this is what we need as a country, and we should channel all our efforts and energies to ensuring that our children, our brothers, our sisters, our future generation actually has access to a decent and quality education.
All right. Honorable Nyamtoro, I know that you have another engagement and you'll be leaving the panel in a few minutes, but it's good that you talk about government policies and the fact that they have to be focused on, ensuring that the education sector does rebound. But before the pandemic, it seemed like a lot of what was happening in the education sector was left to government and other players, those that were interested in education. With the lockdowns, everybody has started focus on education because, like you said, people are now valuing teachers more. I got home at 9 p.m. yesterday and I had to do homework with my daughter because it had to be sent in by 10 p.m. And yes, my wife took pictures of it and she found it quite funny, But the World Vision model that actually brings communities into these kinds of conversations, is there a way in which that model can be used so that even after the pandemic, education does not go back to being, a concern for government and a few who, probably, do some work in the education sector?
Absolutely. I think so. I have read a little bit about the World Vision model myself. And today, as we were having this discussion, I've gotten more insight on a case of Buyikwe, like my fellow panelists were discussing earlier. Now, I think at that point in time is when we adopt the multi-sectoral approach that he highlighted earlier, because then we get to appreciate that these are actually workable things. If we have a success story in Buyikwe, then why not in Nebi, where I come from? Why not in Moroto? Why can't we try it out in Kalangala? I think at this point in time is when we get to share ideas and lay out a platform where government can incorporate these into policies and actually ensure that we have the sustainability of this effect for a better education sector. All
right, thank you very much. You talked about the policies and, I'm passing that hot potato to your colleague, the Honorable Asuman Basalirwa, who has joined us. He's Bujuri Municipality Member of Parliament. He's the President of JEMA Party and Vice Chairperson of PAC, Public Accounts Committee in Parliament. Mr. Julius Mukunda has also joined us, Executive Director, Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group. You commonly know it as CS-BAG. Honorable Basalirwa, as we get rallied for all our policies and attention to, support the education sector. Well, a policy of basically cutting all budgets by 40% is one of the ones that has already affected the education sector. That was struggling even before those cuts. You know, it's not me who has passed this to you, it's your colleague who brought it up, so you can blame her for it. How in one breath do we say the education sector has these problems? We need to finance it more, and then when we make the cuts, we also cut the education sector, knowing we're planning to reopen.
Well, first of all, I want to thank my colleagues, the panelists, for putting the discussion into the context that I think we all expected, and sharing information on the model by World Vision and trying to understand how we should be moving the education sector in the lockdown. But you need to understand that Uganda, in this current lockdown, seems to have its own approach. Our approach is very unique. You will not find it in Rwanda, you will not find it in Kenya, you will not find it in Tanzania. We seem to be having, our approach is only unique to us. And I don't know why we want to pretend to be unique. And we can get experiences elsewhere.
You know, unique can be positive and negative. I'm not sure in what context you're
Yeah,
using
actually
unique
in the negative context. Because you know elsewhere, pupils and students are in school, in the region. They had challenges initially, they addressed them, and one of the things they sought to preserve was actually the education. Among other sectors, the education was preserved. That's why when there are even budget cuts, which by the way was an executive decision, it was not a legislative decision, because I see you want to box me into a corner.
That's not the intention at all. We said today we will not apportion blame.
Okay.
We'll try and give solutions.
Okay, sorry if I misunderstood you. The 40% budget cuts was an executive decision. If you asked me, I think it was unwise. When you look at what is generally happening, it would be understandable, for example, to cut the sports budget. It would be understandable because sports activities had actually been put under lockdown. It would be understandable. It would be understandable maybe perhaps to reconsider the budget of tourism, because after you have closed the airport, even international, there are no travels, maybe perhaps it would be understandable. But you see, with education, we needed to actually either maintain the budget or increase it and adopt other methods of delivering either instruction materials or continuing with education. And in terms of priority, the reason why I think it was unwise, you are now talking about vaccinating the teachers and staff. And I think government's target is about 550,000. That's the target. Now, if we had not cut the budgets, the thing would have been the monies available in that sector. We would have prioritized vaccination of teachers and staff so that you have the teachers and staff in place. Then the pupils or the students, those that are in the category of vaccination, we make the vaccines available to them and take them back to school. And the other argument of having the elderly and other vulnerable groups in that respect. So I really think that the budget cuts were uncalled for. And you know, it affected everybody. For the first time, even Parliament became a victim. You see, Parliament always has its way. But this time, it couldn't have its way. MPs will not travel anymore. Even committees, by the way. My own committee, the Public Accounts Committee, was supposed to be in the field carrying out oversight work on the Nabanja money, what we have called the Nabanja money. the one which was spearheaded by the Prime Minister.
Government relief to the vulnerable Ugandans.
Yes, popularly known as Nambajja money.
Yes.
We are supposed to be moving around the country, investigating that money, the recipients, the lists, but the committees are incapacitated, they can't do much. So there are fewer MPs who are in the field for fewer days. And even so far, the revelations are very interesting, as you people in the media have been reporting. So even Parliament this time around was affected by the cuts. But I really think that perhaps certain sectors should not have been put in the same bracket with other sectors. Education, in my view, is one of them. Health is one of them. Otherwise, you have now created what I call a traffic jam, an education traffic jam, where you have two sets of S1s, two sets of, I think, P1s and P2. Almost every class has two sets. And if we are not very careful, we will go to three sets. Now you are creating a traffic jam. What magic do we intend to pull to cover or address that traffic jam? So I think at the level of policy and budgetary, we really need to do a lot. And you did ask, this model of world vision, does it stop in COVID, or we should borrow it even in post-COVID era? I think we all agree that COVID is here to stay. Yesterday I read a tweet by Onyango Bo. He was saying that there's a new variant in South Africa that has mutated. The level of mutation is such that no amount of vaccine available will address that mutated variant. And I got scared. So it means each day there is a mutation. Now, those of us who are really in the legislative sector and colleagues in the executive sector must begin to think out our education system in the COVID era. I am aware that a lot of online learning has been going on. Is it the way to go? Can we really consider investing in that sector of online learning as a way of addressing this COVID? What if the new variants come in big numbers and different forms and mutations? Are we going to make a lockdown again? So there is need for more critical thinking as we address education in this pandemic.
Let me come back to Mr. Musazi. Oh, Musasizi, I beg your pardon. Online learning, was it going on in Buyukwe?
Thank you, moderator. I think the issue of online, all of us should appreciate that COVID was abrupt. Online learning is a rural district. And when I talk about the word rural, you should know what it means. There are places still without electricity grid. There are places without internet. So to me, I think the issue of online learning and other methods which we should use should be, we should use what we call accessibility model as per now. Each community should be given what they can manage to handle. In Buyukwe, yes, we have urban areas. Those who are in urban, like the municipalities, they could go in for online learning. Then we have those in the rural areas. The minister has helped us that we have provided home study materials, and we have managed to send those home study materials to the rural part of it. So to answer you is that it is yes and no, the issue of online learning. Then you are aware that even the data is very expensive and many cannot afford it. The issue of smartphones. Recently I was talking to a teacher, trying to guide some parent, said you should buy a phone which is now in the current model, because the method of this online learning, you may not, I think the type of design they have made it has been designed for the new phones which are on a certain model. So I think, and that is to a person who may understand that.
Right.
Now, what about my parent in C or alongside the showers may have a problem?
Okay.
So I think we should use accessibility model whereby we give people what they can manage depending on their circumstance.
All right. I should inform the viewer that we've been joined by Dr. Kedres to the agenda. She is Director of Education Standards, Ministry of Education and Sports, and we'll be hearing from her very soon. She's taking notes as the rest of the panelists do make their submissions. Julius, I'm going to come to you, but I'd like to find out from Pascal. He spoke about data, but data being internet. To make decisions for any sector, and especially the education sector, data is needed. The model that World Vision has been running, what kind of data were you generating, and how is it used for making, decisions for the education sector? Even as, we find out whether we are ready to reopen, because that is it's supposed to be a statement of fact. Statement of fact based on data that you have.
Oh, thank you very much. We've been generating data around the standards that are given by government. Standards on pupil to teacher ratio, data on desk to pupil ratio, the wash facilities, water hygiene and sanitation facilities, the ratio of latrine stances to the learners, okay? We've been generating that kind of data. And then we've also been generating data on the ratio of teacher to pupil. And that information is in the database, but when we capture it from the community, we enter it in a system. And then we are able to generate reports and take back the report to the community. And there is discussion of that information going on. Right from the community level, where the data has been generated, to where the policy is being made. The custodians of the standards, okay? And when we bring this data out, most recently, we even used the guideline for COVID-19 SOPs in schools. We went around schools and we were able to generate data. And some schools were meeting the SOP protocol and others were not meeting the protocol. And that became a point for us to follow through with the duty bearers, the schools, and also the different structures, the SMCs and the parents themselves, so that schools actually adhere to those standards. They put in place the standards. There are about 40 standards on that tool for compliance to SOPs. And when we actually tried to analyze it, we found that there were gaps that were, you could actually be able to close those gaps, okay? Gaps to do with having learner safety, because those standards tell you the school should be enclosed, there should be one access, there has to be a temperature gun there, there has to be a structure, response structure at the school, there has to be a designated teacher, who is trained and who is able quickly to link up with the task force.
In case there's...
in case there is need, whom do you contact on the task force? The surveillance team, can they respond quickly? And is there a place where we can temporarily put this person if we found
some kind of isolation
place?
Space.
So we went to these schools using the same approach, and we were able to bring out this data. And there was a discussion, okay, at that level. And because the approach requires that you must have a plan of action.
Right.
So we had a plan of action, and we were following through to ensure that these standards are being implemented. Some of them did not require a lot. I want to thank government because by that time, most of the schools had been given temperature guns. Most of the basic things that were needed in terms of and then we were
Hand-washing facilities and what have you.
facility,
Yeah.
water as well should be there. So then, of course, there was need to train in some of the areas because hand washing, the way people know it, is not the way it is supposed to be done. At least you should, run that water
For about 20 seconds.
after about 20 seconds, and we try to make the children demonstrate how they do it, and then the wastewater has to be directed to some sort of soak pit, so there is no contamination and all that. So then the messages about COVID should be displayed in the classrooms, and children are able to know, and and also have the information how they are supposed to actually protect themselves from COVID-19. So it's about the standards.
Right.
The border is about the standards, and like I've explained to our
Yes,
viewers.
it's very good that you have explained that in greater detail, because at the end of it would have been good if there was a comparison between the schools that had, adhered to these standards and the level of infection at the time schools were closed, and those that had largely not adhered. To find out if these were working. Again, points to the importance of data and decisions based on, data. Mr. Mukunda, I'd like to bring you in at this point. The reality between, what's happening at the planning level and what's happening on the ground. Civil society has, this unique, opportunity to actually be able to comprehend what's being discussed at the high level and then, translate it and implement it or guide the communities in relation, to education service delivery and COVID-19 and safe reopening. Where do we stand?
Thank you so much, and also to World Vision for sharing a model. Some people might think in Uganda we lack models and innovations. Sharing a model. And for me, this social accountability model is quite very important because it really vindicates some of us to say that kicking out primary teachers associations and you replace them with a school management committee was a very bad idea. Because you are bringing back the management of school affairs to the parents. So the moment we said PTAs are over, parents are like, okay, these are Museveni's children, and it is their school. Everything belongs to government. But here you are talking about saying, this is our school, this is where my child goes, and you want communities really to participate to ensure that the school actually functions. So that if a person comes to the DEO here and say, please, we have seen our headmaster drunk in a bar, he can be able to take action because he's not going to be everywhere. He's not going to be in each and every school. Standards agency, they are not going to be in each and every district. It's not going to be. But if communities are organized and mobilized to ensure that service delivery is delivered in the way that it is the standard is required, let me tell you, all of us benefits. But again, I think our biggest challenge is that, like they say, that when COVID comes and they find that your immunity is intact, it goes away. And if they find that it is compromised, it stays with you, and you might end up going on oxygen. I think the same thing with the education system, that we already had some weaknesses grappling with, and COVID came. So it becomes a double tragedy for us. First of all, of course, is that you find that what was our performance rate, from primary 1 to P7, for example. That by P7, you have around 35% have completed. So where are the others have gone? Now COVID has come, and we're talking about the girl child here. I mean, I've lost 2 nieces already. Not that they have died, but they immediately got pregnant. Senior 2 in the villages down there, and you are hoping that they could stay in school and finish. So
they sent us some from the village saying, they want to be safe here. You keep them in Kampala.
Yes. And of course, when lockdown found them there, you wonder how even can bring them. We are contemplating all those areas. Maybe we bring them to Kampala, we stay them in our house and lock it up. But so that's one of the challenges that we are facing. You of course have the whole idea, the private schools. I mean, I'm one of them who say the government should actually fund more public schools, not private schools. But you find out that actually these guys, education being a public good, more than I think 4 million learners, primary and secondary, are in private schools. These are Ugandans. If these schools close, like you rightly said, where are they going to be? What is government planning to do to ensure that these private schools remain running? And I think among them, for me, what I was thinking was that probably, like what other governments do, if you have companies that are providing an important service, you step in, not free money, no. Take over the loans, for example, in the meantime. When you open properly, then the schools start paying back. It's not free money, but because they provide 4 million learners are in private schools. 4 million learners. So that's another solution that you might want to enable that one. Inability to recruit. Sometimes we thought that probably we don't have money to recruit. We don't have money. And that with COVID, of course, with the cuts that are coming up now, maybe, but no, it's not. Some actually districts have failed to recruit, even when money is available. We saw it from last week. I think the PSST was saying, please, the following chief administrators, you have not recruited even when there is money available for you. We have failed to access money from World Bank because we are unable to recruit. Because World Bank is saying, if you are going to Masaka, first reach Busega, then we will pick you from there. You have not even reached Busega. So I think it's important that in terms of the challenge that education is facing, we need to have a mind of, if COVID has come, what do we need? We cannot lock forever. I'm a parent. I wouldn't want my children to go to school. 4 of them, they come back and they say they all have COVID. I don't know where I would put them at the same time. But what do we need to do as a country to have safe opening of schools? He mentioned something which is very important. He said some schools didn't know about COVID. But I know some knew about it and they hid. But there are schools who did not know that children had COVID. That by the time we brought back children, the children even didn't know they had COVID. But some parents who are a bit skeptical, you see your kid has come sneezing and some cough, you say, can you just first do a test? And the guy turns positive. That was that. But I think now we are a bit more prepared. That if we are to open schools, what kind of SOPs should we put in place?
All right.
There are 2 magic bullets in opening schools. Number 1 is vaccination. We must vaccinate.
Who?
We must vaccinate both the children and the teachers. The children who are at the appropriate age of vaccination, because I'm told the ones below 5 and below, is it 10 years and below, they can't vaccinate. But those that can be vaccinated, they get vaccinated. But plus the teachers. That's number 1. And I think vaccination is not, we should not, I think the question is, when you say teachers and students, it's as if the whole population should not be vaccinated. All of us need to get vaccinated. But that's the magic bullet. And the second is regular testing. If today you said, before you come to the studio, please come with your negative, your test results. For example, let me tell you, if one of us went and tested and thought, he was positive, they would not come. They would immediately go back and begin treating themselves, and that means they would limit the spread of the disease. So those 2 areas for me, if we could invest resources in them, we can actually begin to open the economy and the schools a bit better.
All right.
The last part for me is capitation grant. I think our funding for primary schools is extremely very low. Not very low, but I think it's ridiculous, really, if I can say.
What is it, 10,000 shillings?
10,000. I mean, do you have the latest figure? Some are 10, 9. Some mentioned a figure of 17,000, but I know 12,000. For a whole year.
Per year.
For a child, for a whole year per year, we are investing 12,000. I can tell you, if you want to get better quality education or any service, to get better quality service, you must invest in it. And I don't think in this country it's because we lack money. No. In this country, we are lacking, we don't have our priorities right.
All right. Somebody seated next to you has the rare privilege of appropriating. Honorable Basalira, I am not picking on you. You're the only legislator seated on the set. So before I bring in Dr. Toriagenda, I'd like to hear from you on this issue of capitation grant. And I know it has come up in Parliament a number of times. As we plan to reopen schools, of course, the conversation has begun. Where should that conversation be going, at least from Parliament's point of view?
No, I want to agree that the resources are available. Obviously, we have, when it comes to resources, we have two challenges. There is the issue of the misuse and wasteful expenditure. But there is also the aspect of priority. And really, especially our colleagues in the civil society, you have to do a lot, you know, to put pressure on us. Because you see, where we sit in our comfort zones, either as MPs or cabinet or these other policy and decision makers, there are decisions we are taking and they are bad decisions. And the country also knows that they are bad decisions. And they don't speak out, they don't act. For example, look at the cost of public expenditure. Look at the size of Parliament where I sit. And it doesn't matter whether I'm a beneficiary of the big size or not. It remains bad. Look at the size of cabinet. Over 80 ministers. Look at the number of districts we have. And all these things. Now, we have allowed as a country, we have given in. We have allowed the political leadership to take the country in that direction. And we have decided to keep quiet as a country. Unfortunately, we are here talking about social accountability. And social accountability is about the citizenry calling on their leaders to account. So the role of the citizenry. Unfortunately, even the citizenry is being cornered. You know what is happening to civil society. NGOs that are engaged in promoting accountability are being closed over flimsy reasons. So I think it's really a bigger problem. Yes, we will sit in Parliament and play our part. You recall one time there was a discussion in Parliament about the health budget. Now, Parliament unanimously agreed not to pass the budget unless the budget of health had been increased. It was unanimous.
We all remember that standoff in the 9th Parliament.
Yes. And there was a sitting somewhere in Entebbe, a caucus sitting. And people came back to Parliament, they had changed their minds. And the whole country was watching. I know my colleagues will not go into that. It's a fairly sensitive area for those in civil society and the public service. But I can speak, I can comment without any fear of contradiction that you will agree on a position in Parliament as a Parliament, and the party caucus will reverse it. I, as Basalira, will stand on the floor of the House and say, this is wrong. And I will be defeated by the tyranny of numbers. Now, where should my redress be? Where should my refuge be? It should be in the people who are supreme. Now, if the people are being subdued, if they are being subjugated, then you are giving a lot of authority to a small clique of MPs. The 500, how many are we nowadays? You are good at keeping track of our numbers.
529, I believe.
Yes. So you are going to leave the country, and it's very risky, it's very dangerous. And an assertive population, an assertive wananchi gives the leaders a blanket check to do what they want.
All right. The good thing with this social accountability model is that it puts power back in the hands of the people, especially for something, a public good like education. Now, back to the capitation grant.
Yes.
What can be done
No,
from your vantage position?
there is only one solution to it. Let's take education as a priority. Let's agree that education in this country is a priority. And commit the necessary resources. I don't want to call them enough, because given our overall resource envelope, you cannot talk about enough.
But
we can talk about the necessary resources to that sector. And once we have the necessary resources to that sector, the capitation grants will increase.
Okay.
And once they increase, the DEO here and our colleagues in the education sector will be able to have sufficient resources to invest in our children. So this idea of talking about 12,000 shillings per annum on a pupil will not arise.
Okay.
So can we have a discussion on that aspect? And if it means budgetary cuts elsewhere to concentrate in that area, let's do it. Okay. Let's have a discussion on that.
All right. Thank you very much, Honorable Basalirwa. I'd like now to come to Dr. Kedre Storiagenda. And I know time won't allow for you to respond to everything that has been raised. And you might want to start with that, but actually would like you to start from a very brief update on the reopening. Because part of what we talked about earlier was safe reopening of schools. But there's varying information about the reopening. Today there's a headline that says 2 weeks. Schools have said 2 weeks. How do we even get ready in 2 weeks? But let's hear from you, Doctor.
Thank you very much, moderator. Sorry, I missed out. I was sitting outside there waiting. I wish I had been in to listen into the discussions, not here on the panel, but right in the room. But yes, all of us are parents and grandparents, and everybody is anxious about reopening. One of the exciting things about the sector, Ministry of Education, is that every family is a stakeholder, somehow. So when something happens on education, all of us are affected. And rightly so, because our children are our future, and our future is our children. When I was growing up, my father never went to school, but he would be buying pieces of land, and the thinking was that he's trying to accumulate something for his children, so that when he passes, they can share, some reasonable amount. So now we know that in the 21st century, in this fourth industrial revolution, the only weapon we have with us is knowledge, and education is the real entrance into that one. So yes, we hope that we shall open. We don't know when. I don't know. I have not read the paper. I've been so busy since morning. I've not even picked it. So I don't know where they got the information from. But as a sector, we have been...
the Ministry of Education has not said we're reopening in 2 weeks?
No, because under COVID, and we all know it, whichever major decision has to be made has to go through a series of approvals. A sector comes up with a plan and strategies, subjects them to the National Task Force, eventually to Cabinet, before you can call it, a decision. So since that process hasn't been done, then nobody should really claim any decision at the moment. However, we've done our part, as a sector, and we hope that the process can enable us to open at some point. I'm so excited by our Honorable Member of Parliament and his contributions. I hope you are several of you in Parliament, so that when these budget cuts you are talking about comes, the first one will be the parliamentary one, because the 500 plus people, if we all made a contribution by a cut, I think it will help out. That's not foregoing. I would like to say that yes, what I've listened to here are very important ideas and thoughts, which we too agree to, and which we hope at some point they can come up and work. Regarding reopening of schools, I think two things are clear, and all the people who have been here since I came have talked about them. We are looking at safety, but we are also looking at continuity of learning. Since the lockdown came, we have had attempts on continuity of learning, and some of the examples, I had my brother Dio talking about them, through the e-systems, as you mentioned, for those who can access. But because our commitment is for all learners, we also came up with other versions of radios and TVs, but also self-study materials, so that children don't think it's all done and finished. And indeed, I know that some children think, 2 years, I'm too old, I'm finished. And that is why this kind of dialogue is very, very critical. That is why we now need every citizen, every adult, to come in and say, no, we've had a break, it's been unfortunate, but you can actually proceed, you can continue. My brother's nephews, that you can produce your children, and after feeding them for 6 months, and your parents or guardians can take care of them, that you can actually go back to school. Because education and the formal education now is really the only way.
Yeah. For clarity,
Yes.
is it now allowed for girls who got pregnant to go back to school? Because that was a problem for a long time.
Incidentally, that has been a policy guideline since Honorable Bitamazire's time. It has always been there. Once the child is ready to stay back, the child can re-enter school. There's been no law against it. I know that in some of our religious-founded institutions, they've not been allowing them, but that's just on the individual, whatever. But in terms of Ministry of Education policy, as long as you have gone off with the child and can have someone take care of him or her, you can go back to school. So that one, yes, and especially now with COVID and the challenges that came, and it takes me back to society. I think our greatest challenge, Honorable Member and civil society representative, is our societies. In the first lockdown, I was watching, I think your television actually, and there was a testimony of a young girl. She was in some senior 3 school, and she said, I'm looking forward to going back to school because at least at school I would be safe. I was broken as a mother that now our society is such that people are no longer safe at home. If someone is not safe at home, which other place can you be safe? Because when we were growing up, even getting into what you call your village, running back from school, everybody would look to my good. But here now is a child at home, and she's saying, I feel more secure at school. So I think, and I know that World Vision works with societies and all of us are part of this. I think we need to put a lot of focus on our society. What has gone wrong with us? Why should I accommodate my brother and he sleeps with my daughter who is a niece? Because they are safe, and they are no longer safe. So what has happened to us? I think we need to get there, and that will support our education.
Right.
Because indeed, clear the roles of different stakeholders. The parents, their roles are very clear. Actually, my brother, the PTAs were not, they are not abolished. That is why in Schedule 2, which talks about school management committees, they are supposed to have a representative of the PTA. That means that fundamentally, PTAs are on, except that by the time the UPE came in, they were kind of used as an engine for generating money whenever schools wanted. And because now in the law they had said, don't chase away any child because he has not paid money, now they said, so PTAs, the parents are still there, the teachers are still there. But now the big function that schools used to look at them from, when it was touched, then they thought they were abandoned, but they are still on. And these are things we should help our societies to know, that you as parents, you are still parents, you as teachers, you are still teachers. Nobody has stopped you from associating to look at how can we teach better, how can we have better discipline, how can we have support because in that very law where they say don't chase away anyone for not paying money, the second subsection says, but where there is an urgent need to support the school, you can come up once and support, but not chase any child for not being able to. The grown-ups yourselves. So it comes back again to our society.
All right.
That the society still has a lot that we can do. And I'm glad this kind of dialogue is on and this conference is on. Yep. And I'm sure many are listening. Of course, those who are listening are the privileged ones who have televisions. But if all of us who are listening can pick it up and say, let me go up to my village and start a sensitization of sorts and help them to know that this school where I did my primary school, which is now completely gone, because people no longer bother that the school is there, and yet it's in their society. If the whole effort of society revival could come, so that society starts looking at itself as, we are the owners of this community. If this community prospers, then we are better. If our children learn, then we are assured of tomorrow. Then definitely we'll have better quality.
And one of the things that this model, that World Vision, is basically implementing, is that it takes these conversations back to the society. Now, it's important for us to talk about a part of, the education sector that has been closed actually longer than the others. And yet, government had made it a policy on, early childhood development. But we remember very clearly the minister, actually, it was said that, these ones will stay closed until we are safe. From what almost everybody has been saying, the COVID is not going away. What happens with that gap? Because the reason as to why that policy was put in place was because there was recognition of how important it was for, the learning to start at those formative ages.
The good news is that what we call early childhood development goes up to age 8. And age 8 is about P3. In fact, when we are looking at ECD, it stretches from 3 years to 8. So even when you start P1 at 6, you are still part of the early childhood development. And teachers who specialize in early childhood development in the PTCs actually learn early childhood development, and that's why they are able to instill literacy and numeracy skills and help them to progress. So yes, under COVID, what we called nursery, kindergarten, and what we normally called early childhood development has suffered most. But not only them, up to P3, by the way, and the DO is here, they've not gone back to school. And that's one of our greatest desires in the strategy we have now, is that they should be prioritized when schools open, because they've not had opportunity. Others were able to go back. But yes, I do understand what you are saying, and we have a policy that we approved just before COVID concerning early childhood development. But at that point, when the minister made the statement, we had got it from the scientists and other sources that, one, those children can't wear masks, and yet mask wearing is one of the easiest way to prevent. Two, they are already, even before COVID, very vulnerable to all these viruses, I don't know whether you've had children in nursery. Almost every week they have a flu.
Yeah.
They have a flu. They are somehow, because this one recovers, this one is peaking, next week picks it from the other one. So there was that one. So we're saying now, if now this flu, which they already get, is mixed up with COVID, what happened? That his daughter has come and we are in class, and I don't hug. It doesn't work.
We tried it at home. It didn't really work.
It didn't work.
You arrive and they just come running to you.
Yeah, because
so you have...
bail me out, is basically to train children to be human, to be social. Not the madness we had in Uganda, where nursery children have homework, where they are picked at 5 o'clock in the morning by those small little buses, and they are dropped at 7 by the parents from work. What we were doing was not right to begin with. I think God had to intervene with early childhood.
I hope we actually learn and make sure that some of these things, these bad habits do not creep back.
So anyway, so children at that age could not do social distancing. They could not wear masks. They already have dispositions of those flus. But also, what we learned then, which still scares me, is that although they may not fall sick when they got COVID-19, but the effects of it on their lives may be exposed later. If something happens on their lungs and they develop a scar, but they don't get into bed, they don't fall sick, they don't take serious treatment. But that scar now will remain. And as they grow up, it will, reflect. So we thought, is it safe for these little innocent people to be exposed to this kind of thing? So that's how that declaration came. However, we are saying, as long as schools are teaching properly from P1, these children can pick. And especially for my schools in the rural. If the teachers could pick them up from where they are and teach them properly, by P2, they would have picked themselves up. And we shall then go back to normal life, yes.
All right. We have to bring this to a close. NBS has been so good to each one of us to just say, he gave his two, proposals, and he says those ones are, magic bullets. Let me just hear from the rest very quickly before I come to you for a final word on how you believe we can open safely, because that's we want the education sector to open. And let me begin with Pascal just next to me.
Thank you very much. Yes, I will agree with what the panelists have said. Children that are at that age where they can receive a vaccine, I think that would guarantee safe opening of schools. But we also have to ensure that the schools are putting into place the SOPs that have been provided to them to be able to open safely. All those requirements. You'll find some schools have put certain standards in place. The main one that you find people have prioritized is water and then the temperature gun. But there are many other standards, about 30 of them, that you find they are not being prioritized. And
in which, implementation can be caused, this was identified as something crucial that has to be implemented for the learners to be safe.
And encouraging every school to put them in place. And where they need support, their managers at that level of schools. Because one of the things we discovered during an engagement around management, and you could see that if really if guidelines are adopted, but we should have at least 90% of those that we found that there were only top 4 schools that had achieved 90% implement. About 4 or 5. Then there are those that achieved 70 and following through to ensure that those standards are being.
The DO cannot do it. You've engaged
the SMC in place. We can actually have the duty to go and know what are the standards. And that is where we come in and actually enable them to engage. So go and monitor. And indeed, they go and monitor because we have these practitioners, what we call practitioners, citizen voice and action practitioners, who are equipped with these standards. So they visit these schools and they cause a dialogue with the managers of the schools. And then they call the policymakers at sub-county and then at district level. Then they sit on a round table to discuss the findings. I think that is very critical.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, in Buyukwe, your situation is not as bad, but it was mentioned here that private schools, some have closed. The ratio of teachers to students was already wanting. The ratio of the number of students per desk was beyond the recommended. I believe it's 1 to 3.
1 to 3.
And we will not talk about those who don't even have a desk. With that in mind, what would you propose for safe reopening? For you said Buyukwe is rural. Now for rural schools especially.
And thank you, moderator. As you already said, we need to have safe opening of schools, the opening of schools. And already in Buyukwe, as I talk now, I want to once again encourage all teachers in the country to go for vaccination. In Buyukwe, by yesterday, we were meeting with the district force. I think teachers were at around 40. So I think that one could work out for us and it would give a safe way. Then second, as we talk now, obviously on the line of social accountability, our inspectors are in the field and we are using local megaphones to communicate to the stakeholders to come on board, and we are going through the SOPs with them, even on the issue of children, communicate to the locals down there and all other stakeholders. So we think by the end of some 1 or 2 weeks, would have done some sensitization to those people. And as you said, we are giving a package into data about private schools, teachers, and we have been communicating. To those who are ready to open, we have communicated the SOPs and what we expect out of them. And even the inspectors, right from the ministry in the field, even yesterday I was with one from DES, they're inspecting schools to see how, I think by the time they declare opening of schools, we shall be at a certain level. And I'm convinced that really we need to open, as we said, for continuity of learning. And we have a challenge, like other districts. Most of our children have really suffered during this time of COVID. Early marriages. Even last PRE, we had those who were active. And they will be very active to make sure that we put SOPs in place to get our schools open.
All right. Very quickly, Honorable Basa, magic bullets. So you'll give how we reopen safely, then your parting shot, and then the rest will give their parting shot.
One, to remind each of us that the SOPs we are talking about are actually part of our laws. The Minister for Health has issued a statutory instrument.
Right.
Criminalizing various aspects in the SOPs. And by the way, people are not aware. But I think for you to effectively do the enforcement, you must do the sensitization. Especially the leaders. The other day, I put some minister on order in Parliament. He had put off his mask. And I told the speaker, minister, because you see, Bujiri is watching these proceedings. So we must be exemplary. There must be sensitization. And the sensitization should be both on the SOPs, but also on the vaccination. You are aware that some teachers are shying away from vaccination, which really is very unfortunate. How can teachers be shying away from vaccination? And you see there's been a lot of loose talk and misinformation about vaccination. It creates impotence. You are going to die in 2 years. Is it 6 months? So there's need for confidence building around that aspect as we move towards the opening.
Okay. Thank you very much. Julius?
Yes, I think for me, as part of my parting shots, is one, we need to open, but safely. I think that's very important. There is an aspect which you mentioned a bit, but I think I would like to add on that. Inspection. Currently, we've calculated and found out that it takes, government has budgeted for 56,000 per year to inspect a school. And maybe the DO, you might find that he goes to a school once a year if he has to inspect all the schools in Ibukwe. Now, with SOPs, I think we need to triple that to ensure that you go to, people don't relax.
Right.
That the headmasters and teachers, both in the primary and the secondary, really are the higher and enforce these SOPs. So if the inspection budget is so little, they are going to do so little.
Okay.
Even the standards agency, you need resources to ensure that these things are enforced. And I think that's something that we are missing in terms of inspecting our schools, not only for COVID, but also for other learning outcomes. I think that for me would be very, 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 very
all right.
Thank you.
And I hope as they give a plan for reopening, there will be something specific on inspection.
Inspection, yeah.
All right. SDO, your parting shot.
In short, I'm saying really we are very ready to see that our schools are open. And as he has said, part of the money we are using, good enough, we are lucky that the ministry released the money for inspection, and we are allowed to use it for this quarter. And the one, as I said, is the one we are using to move around, to make sure that our schools are safe. Right. I want also to thank World Vision for the model they brought in the district. It has really helped us. Really, as you said, we are somewhere, and by the time COVID came in, almost all our stakeholders, and especially the parents, were comfortable with their schools. And they knew whatever was happening in the schools because of the social accountability model we have, all the time consulting them. and calling them for stakeholder meetings. Recently, we have just concluded the Education Stakeholders Conference, still discussing the issue of education in the district, and it was sponsored by World Vision. So we are so grateful with their presence in the district,
Right.
and they have really taken us a step.
And thank you very much for coming to share that experience. I will skip Dr. Turiagenda. I will conclude with you. Pascal?
Yes, in brief, I just want to say that as World Vision, we have children at the center of our heart, and given that the education sector is where we find the children, we want to continue to promote approaches like citizen voice and action to be able to ensure that there is participation of the people, even in implementing the SOPs and monitoring the standards more, so that our children are safe at school, but also other standards are being met at school, so that our children can have quality education, but also have access to those facilities they need to be able to learn well.
Thank you very much. Dr. Turiagenda?
Thank you very much. I do entirely agree, and that is our key focus now as a ministry, to ensure that a reasonable number of teachers and non-teaching staff who are in contact with our learners and above 18, children above 18 who go to universities and tertiary institutions are vaccinated. So I want to make an appeal again to add my voice to others that wherever you are as a teacher, non-teaching staff in a school or college or university, and children above 18, please use every opportunity which comes for you to be vaccinated. Do not believe what you just hear. Remember that your life is entire in your hands. Secondly, I want to appeal to all of us as adults and to say that we are all responsible for the effective learning of children. Part of social responsibility is that we as adults are really entirely responsible for the children that are under us. To the fathers, you are not just a father by producing a child. You are a father because you can support this child to grow and be useful. To the mother, the same, and that is social responsibility. God gives you an opportunity to have a child, not because you meet it along the road, but because he wants you to be responsible for him or her. So as we plan to open and hope to open, please prepare for this child, that he will have food. He will not spend the whole day at school without eating, that he or she will have the basic instructional materials, an exercise book, a pencil, a pen, something that will make him comfortable when a teacher is teaching. Once that is done, and jointly we monitor, because the school management committees, the structures that exist, have the authority from the law to actually do monitor. And you can do that at a daily basis. The more we monitor and keep our schools safe, the more we keep the SOPs we ourselves, the adults, then the easier it will be for us to run schools and for our country to be back in one piece. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, our dear viewer, but a special thank you to our panelists, the Honorable Basarirwa, Mr. Julius Mukunda from CS-BAG, Mr. Chizito Musasizi from Buyukwe, DEO, Madam Kedres Turiagenda from the Ministry of Education and Sports, and from World Vision, Pascal Freeman Owucha. Would like to thank you very much for sharing your knowledge. Of course, the guests we had earlier on, like the National Female Youth MP and the representative from World Vision, Mr. Ramsey, and from FENO. Would like to thank you for being part of this broadcast. The government has committed to giving access to quality education to all Ugandans. The government cannot carry this alone. You and I have a role to play. It has been mentioned on this show today. So I hope that you will play your role. Remember, COVID is still here, so please keep yourself safe, keep the people next to you safe, and even as schools open, let's make sure that the students will be safe in the schools. A big thank you to NBS for enabling us reach you with this discussion. Until next time, I've been your host, Iguma Gabriel. Goodbye and God bless you.